Hello, everybody, and welcome to this class on Podium Panache, Advanced Presentation Skills. I have with me Arunima Kamat. How are you, Arunima?
Good.
You're looking a little tired. All good, Arunima?
Yes.
You worked very hard on putting the communication content together, haven't you?
Yes. Pulling
Okay.
all-nighters, back-to-back classes.
Back-to-back classes has been very exciting. Yes, come on, let's get started with this subject. It's a shorter than usual class or section of a class, so we should get done with this relatively soon. So, what are we going to discuss today? We are going to discuss three key things here. We're going to discuss how to make numbers meaningful during a presentation. The second thing that we're going to discuss is using command phrases. And the third thing that we're going to discuss is ending with impact. And the reason why we call this advanced presentation skills is for you to actually start doing a lot of these things. You need to have a fairly good command over the basics of presentations. If you don't have a command over the basics of presentation, you're not going to be able to do some of these skills that have some of these things that have been recommended here. So this is really the next level of it. So let's start with the first one, which is making numbers meaningful. Okay, now let me go back first before I come to this slide. In most business presentations, numbers play a very, very important part, right? Because especially if you're going to be making presentations to senior management, middle management, to a customer, or any stakeholder for that matter, in the end, what people want to see is numbers. And often those numbers come down to money. It could be money saved or money earned. In the end, a lot of things boil down to money saved or money earned, right? So even if you're going to talk about how a certain software is going to save the time of the employees in a company, that time saved again can be calculated in terms of the amount of money that means, right? So a lot of times presentations revolve around numbers, and therefore knowing how to play with those numbers or make them meaningful is something very important, right? Now, there are three things here, and I'm going to explain each one of these three things through examples to you all. But first, I quickly want you all to go through this, right? So there are three main ways in which numbers are made relevant or meaningful. So the first thing is where you break numbers down. Okay, when a seemingly high number, amount, or cost is broken down in a manner that makes it appear negligible, that's what breaking it down means. When you break it down, the chances of the stakeholder agreeing to your proposal or the customer buying into you is much higher, right? Now, the second one actually to keep in mind is make it big or extrapolation, which is the bang opposite of break it down. The process of showing the stakeholder an advantageous bigger picture in the long run is called extrapolation. It may not be the technical definition of extrapolation, but that's broadly what you're trying to do. The amount that a stakeholder saves earns is showcased to him from a few years down the line perspective. This makes the overall figure appear significantly huge and profitable, right? So if you know how to play with numbers in a way, you know how to break them down where required, and you know where to extrapolate them. And once you do that, then you do comparison, right? So when the price of a product, amount saved or amount earned is compared to something else, which showcases how beneficial your idea, plan, or proposition is, right? So I'm going to try to explain this to you through some examples. Okay, now what is break it down, right? How do you do this? So this is typically something that an insurance salesperson will do with you extremely well, right? So he will say, an insurance sales in his presentation, if he has one, will say, okay, all the figures that I'm stating are wrong, because I don't remember what insurance figures are. So please don't go by these figures. But he will say, okay, to get a cover of 50 lakh rupees, okay, say medical insurance, you are going to have to pay rupees 12,000 per year. Okay, that's what you're going to have to pay to get a cover of 50 lakh rupees. Now, 12,000 may seem a lot of money to you at some point of time. So you'll say, okay, you know what? Don't think of this as 12,000 rupees per year. think of it as 12,000 divided by 12, which is rupees 1,000 per month. That's what you're paying. And then he'll go one step further and say, okay, don't think of it as rupees 1,000. You're basically going to be paying, in a way, rupees 33 per day is what you're going to be paying, right? This is all that you need to pay, and for that amount you're going to secure your family for 50 lakh rupees if you have to go to the hospital or if anything goes wrong with you. So isn't it worth paying 33 rupees every day to get 50 lakh rupees? Right. So now this is a classic way in which somebody breaks down the figure for this to seem very small. Okay. Now let's bring the logic of comparison to this. So what does a person do while comparing? So he will say, sir, this 33 rupees per day, a coffee at Starbucks. If you have one coffee at Starbucks, that coffee will cost you today 250 bucks. All right. Even if you have one such coffee a day, it's costing you 250 bucks every day. And here I'm only talking about 33 rupees, right? If this insurance guy knows that you're a smoker, he will say, sir, today the cost of one cigarette is rupees 10. Right. So if you smoke 5 cigarettes, you're spending rupees 50 per day, right, on cigarettes. That's what you're spending. And we're talking about a cover of 50 lakhs that you're going to get by just spending 33. So he takes that small figure and then he compares it to something which will make you feel bad in a way, right, or get you an understanding of saying, okay, 33 rupees is very, very small, right? So this is how you could potentially break up a figure. Okay, now let me show you an example of something where you can extrapolate. Okay. New slide. New slide. Okay. Arunima, can you see the slide? The blank slide?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So now let's look at an example of how you can make something big. Okay. Make something big or extrapolate, right? How can you do that? Now let's look at an example of, say, an HR team coming out and taking an initiative of saving paper. Let's assume you're a law firm and you end up printing a lot of paper as a part of your work. So now the HR team wants to ensure that you're not printing that much paper, right? So they come up with an initiative which is a paper saving initiative, and the HR team says, you know what, guys, we want an initiative where we're going to reduce our printing by 20%, right? That's what we are going to do in the next year. We want to reduce this because it's good as far as cost is concerned, and it's very, very good as far as the environment is concerned, right? For these two reasons, we're going to reduce our printing by 20%. Now, what kind of an impact is this 20% going to have, right? So on an average, each one of us end up printing 10 pages a day, right? That's what we end up printing per employee, 10 pages a day. And if we reduce this by 20%, basically we're reducing 2 pages per day is what we're reducing, right? Now, if 2 pages a day, and if we work close to 250 days in a year, if we work 250 days in a year, that means into 2 pages a day. So this means we're going to end up saving 500 pages in a financial year. That's what we're going to be saving, right? Now, the cost of one page is rupees 10, right? So each one of us is going to end up saving for our company 5,000 rupees, right? And we have 3,000 employees that work in our office. So that's 3,000 into 5,000, right? So that is equals to rupees 15. Mm, 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 Okay, right? So this is, we're going to end up saving 1 crore, 1.5 crores a year, right? Just on paper cost, right? That's how much money we're going to spend. Now, if you think of this 1.5 crore, this is a cost where we as an organization, they can say, you know what, our annual offsite costs 25 lakh rupees. So we as an organization, if we just reduce our printing by 20%, we can go on 6 more offsites. Right, so they can say that, or they can say that if basically the cost that we can save will pay 1 year's rent of our head office. 1 year's rent it will pay. That's how much money it is, right? Or we can go for 6 picnics. So you can compare it to some figure that basically gives people in that company an idea of how much money they're saving, right? So again, so these are more detailed explanations. You can give say, for you to make it big, make the number big, you can, it can be anything, right? So you can do something as simple as saying, okay, this cost measure that we took is saved, say, you know, that is going to save 1 crore rupee for the company in a year, right? And you know that saving is going to be year on year, so you can say we're going to save 1 crore rupee in a year. Or if, of course, it has to be factually correct, you can say we're going to save 5 crore rupees in over a period of 5 years because of this thing, right? So 5 crore rupees, because when you say 5 crore rupees in 5 years, that in a way sounds much better than 1 crore in 1 year, although it's the same logic, right? Now, if you need to make, for example, a proposal to your senior management that some cost needs to be incurred, a best way to do it is like that insurance guy, right? Where you say 12,000 bucks, and then you say, okay, but we're only going to be paying this much per month, or we're only going to be paying this much per employee, or some way like that, right? So you can break it down if you know that's beneficial for your company and you want to get an approval from somebody, or if you're talking to a customer about your proposition and you want to tell them that it's cost effective, you can always break it down. If you again want a number to seem very big, you extrapolate or know how to make it big, exactly like this or the previous example that I gave you. And in both cases, what you need to do is you can take that amount and in a way compare it to something that will give them an idea, that will give them an idea of what is happening, right? Because the minute I say it's 33 rupees per day, which is just 10% of what you spend on a coffee every day if you drink a Starbucks coffee, or which is probably half the cost that you spend on you know, your smoking every day, right? So it's a very, very minimal cost that you need to bear per day, that will give you a 50 lakhs cover, right? So that is an amazing way to explain this thing to someone when you're talking to them, right? And that's the whole logic of comparison. So comparison can be used in different fields as well, right? So if I am a aircraft manufacturer and I'm talking about a new aircraft that we're making, right? So very often, if it's a, sorry, forgive my drawing, if it's an aircraft, you can say that, okay, this new aircraft is the size of a football field, right? It's the total size of a football field that this new aircraft is, and a typical aircraft would be, you know, probably half of this size is what a typical aircraft is. This is absolutely double, because you, again, comparison is very important, because you'd have seen what a regular aircraft looks like at an airport, and then you say this is double that, right? It's double the size of a regular aircraft. So again, comparison even in size like this really helps people understand things much better. So you compare it to something that they're used to seeing, and you know, that is what makes sense, right, to people. Yes, Arunima, do you have any questions on this, or do you think this is fairly well explained?
No, I think I'm pretty clear, so no questions.
Okay. Yeah, is there now? Yeah, but you know, by the way, politicians are doing this to us all the time, right? So that's why it's so difficult to trust any figures that you hear politicians typically talk about, because all that they are doing is they're often they're extrapolating figures, they're breaking them down according to the convenience, they're comparing it to something else, right? They're using all these things, but often it's not done with the right intent very often, right? And if you use these, breaking it down, extrapolation to the in a positive way, right, to serve a positive outcome in a way, that's something which is very important, and it's a tool that can be used very well, right? So that's what numbers are about. And again, like I said, it's important because most of our presentations revolve around numbers, and if you don't know how to play around with numbers, and these are of course the best ways to play around them, right, that is something that will make them look good or not make them look good. Now, the second thing is power of command phrases. Okay, now what are command phrases? Command phrases are basically, especially if you're making long presentations, you want to be saying stuff that brings people's attention towards what you're saying. It's really that simple, right? So we typically, as trainers, often end up doing 1 day or 2 day workshops, right? So we're doing very very long presentations to people. So people's attention span often, not just when you do 1 day or 2 day presentations, even if you're doing a half an hour presentation, the same thing. It's a little that like that heartbeat monitor, right? So their attention span sometimes spikes, then it goes down again, and then it's like this, and then again it spikes towards something, and then it goes down, their attention span. So this is the typical kind of attention span that people have when they're listening to a presentation. So what do these command phrases do? The job of the command phrase is to bring people's attention back to the presentation and the topic that you're discussing, right? And so these are some of the command phrases that you can use. You can say it's essential that you remember, and then say whatever you have to say, because the minute you say it's essential that you remember, you tend to listen to it a lot more. If you leave here with only one thought, if you say something like that, then again people's attention will be there towards what you're saying. Here is the answer you all want to know, right? If you can say something like that, people's attention goes towards it. Let me repeat that. And if you repeat something again, people's attention will go towards it. It's absolutely critical to understand that. Okay, now listen to this part. The fact is this. By the way, if you go back to a lot of the presentations and these classes that I conduct, you will see that I say a lot of these things very often, right? Because I want to bring your attention back to the slide. So, I genuinely believe that a lot of things are critical. So I'll keep saying that, okay, this is something which is critical because I believe it. So I say it, but it's also a way for me to kind of get your attention back to this. And I'll say something that, okay, listen to this part. It's important, right? The fact is, regardless of what you heard before, first of all, the next thing to consider is the fact that another important factor, right? So all these things are very simple, simply used to grab your attention and get it back to the presentation that you're making, right? So keep throwing in these words to get people's attention to things that are important. Okay, now any questions here, Arunima?
No.
Okay. So let's go to the third part, which is ending with impact, right? How can you end with impact? Why should you end your presentation with impact? Just as you grab the audience's attention at the start, you must ensure that your conclusion is memorable. The conclusion is your last chance to make a strong final impression. It's an opportunity to persuade your audience to follow your call to action. An impactful conclusion should bring the focus back to your core message, right? Because very often we know that starts of presentations are very very important, right? How you start is important, but what tends to happen in the start is that we're often pretty nervous right at the start. So even if you want to make your presentation very impactful when you're starting, it often doesn't end up happening, right? But by the end of your presentation, now you spent a certain amount of time on stage, and now you have hopefully a certain amount of confidence as you go along in that presentation. So at least ensure that you make a powerful ending. So what I tell people is, I know that the start, although I've given you all a bunch of tricks of how to start your presentation, I know that sometimes that's not possible because of nerves, but at least you can end your presentation powerfully. And that's when people are actually dispersing at the end of it. That's when you want to meet your objective. That's when this call to action, which we're talking about, which is basically you want something from the audience. You should be able to get it at the end, which will happen if you make a powerful ending. It's not going to happen otherwise, right? And that's very, very important. I remember, I'll give you this logic as a trainer. We would often have 2 day workshops, right? And what we would end up telling a lot of our trainers is, make the end powerful and you'll end up getting great feedback for your workshop, right? We'll end up telling that, and they know how to end their workshop properly. So even if certain portions of the 2 days have been very hard for the participants because of the exercises that they've done, sometimes some subjects itself are relatively heavy for them to understand, right? But if you end powerfully, people kind of go away with that powerful end that you have, right? So it needs to be done literally by design for you to end powerfully. Okay, so these are the 4 things that you can do to end with impact. Okay, so let's look at it one by one. Number one, alert your audience that you're nearing the end. Okay, if you remember during school and college, um, the students and all of us used to start paying attention when the professor or the guest lecturer said, last but not the least. Right? If he ended with something last but not the least, you'd wake up and say, okay, ab bata, what do you want to tell me? Right? Or when he said, okay, in conclusion, then all of us would wake up from our chairs and say, okay, now tell me. Okay, that's again, this entire thing, alerting the audience, is basically another form of command phrases, right? These are just command phrases that you use at the end, where you say, finally, in conclusion, let me sum up by saying, as I bring this to a close, or let me close by saying, or last but not the least. Right? You can use any of these terms to alert the audience and then do your end, right? Because you want to use the command phrase logic. Of course, summarize the key points of your presentation. If you use the McKinsey model, which is when you do it in 1, 2, 3, 4, if you have 4 points, you can always end with those 4 points, where you can say, okay, so to end this presentation, the reason why we should move our factory from location A to location B is this, and this. The reason why you should work better as against any other executive training company is, number 1 is this, number 2 is this, number 3. So if you're clear on what your points are, it's very easy for you to summarize your points, right? And they should basically be good, crisp headlines that you're using, which are your slide breakers in the way, the same McKinsey principle that we've studied. And under that, again, after the headlines, you may want to just mention some of the crucial points under each one of those headlines that you believe are extremely important. That is a call that I would leave up to you, depending on how long the presentation has been there for, and how important those sub points are, right? So you may want to just quickly say that, okay, so just to summarize, these are my main points, and these are some of the sub points that are crucial for you to know as we end, right? Because again, what the audience is going to end up taking back from the workshop is the stuff that you do at the end. That's when our attention span is the highest, right? So again, that's another reason for you to summarize your key points. Again, if you want the audience to, very often, if you're presenting to your senior management and you're proposing moving your factory from location A to B, you want to at the end ask that senior management right then, right? So you want to say them, okay, so these are my key points, sir. Now I'd like to know what your opinion is. Do we have your go ahead on it, or do you have any other points that you'd want to state? Because what you essentially want to do is, you want to get their nod, or you want to understand what their possible questions or objections are towards the proposition that you've made, right? Because you're there to give them a solution. So they should say, okay, these are some questions that I have. So you can either clear those questions for them, or the decision needs to be made of saying that, okay, we're going ahead with this proposition. If you're, say, talking about, if one of our work better business development or consultants are going to a big corporate and they're making a presentation telling them why they should work with us or why they should buy a certain product of us, in the end you want the person to say, okay sir, or okay madam, what is it that you think? So what is your decision? What are your thoughts? Because ideally you want them to say, okay, we want to think about it. And then you'll say, okay, if you want to think about, what exactly do you want to think about? Tell me, so I can kind of add to that a little. But you want, after you make your presentation, you have an objective, and you need to ensure that you're somewhere moving towards that objective. So stop there and ask the audience after that. And that will only work well if you end up summarizing your key points. Right now, what a lot of people do is they will summarize, but they won't really, they summarize. If you're clear of what your objective is, what you want, please ask your audience for that thing, right? Whatever you want, ask the audience for it. So you may ask them directly, saying, say, okay sir, so are we going to start working together on this? And then they'll say no. And then again, you want to ask, they'll say, I want to think about it. You say, okay, tell me, what exactly do you want to think about? Right? So now you're again roping them into that conversation, because your objective is that they buy your product. If that doesn't happen, it's not going to work. So summary, and then move towards your objective and ask the audience for it. Okay, so that's something that needs to be done. Okay, the third point is, use a strong call to action. The primary purpose of of your presentation is to inspire the audience to action. Without a call to action, your presentation is incomplete. Use powerful instructional words, calls to action like begin the journey, join the fight, donate today, are to the point and let the audience know what you're hoping for, right? So at times the call to action could be a different one, right, where you want people to begin on something. It could be a certain change that you're proposing in the company. The action that you want may not be immediate, right? What did we say? We've kept harping on this point through our communication coaching, right? What objective of your communication, whether it's a presentation, email, or a meeting, is what action do you want from your audience or the other side? Sometimes that action is immediate, like an approval, and sometimes the action that you want is delayed, right? Or it's later. Like for example, if you say that let's make this 20% reduction in printing of paper, the action that is going to take place from your audience is not immediate. They're not going to give you something immediately, but you want to influence them in a way so that they take the action later. So you want to make that presentation in that kind of a way. So that's why, again, in the end, for these delayed ones, you need to use very, very strong call to action where you say, okay, come on, let's begin this fight here, let's begin this journey here at this point of time, and actually start printing papers 20% less than we do, and let's have an impact on our costs, let's have an impact on the environment, right? So you want to end with something strong, which is a call to action. Okay, if you don't do that, it's not going to work. But again, as I keep saying, whether it's your email, whether it's your meeting or your presentation, all of that can happen if you're clear on what your objective is, which is what is your purpose of communication, what is your goal of communication, why are you communicating, and most importantly, what action do you want at the end of the communication, whether it's immediate or delayed, right? You need to be clear about that. Okay, so end with a memorable quote or story. If you can't find the perfect words to end with, use someone else's word. Share a powerful quote which is related to your key message. Alternatively, end with a compelling story. A story at the end can creatively sum up the information you have shared. A story should affect your audience's emotional and cause them to no, the story should affect your audience emotionally and cause them to remember your message for a long time. Okay, so this is something that needs to be done. Yes, so I was saying that so this is something that you can use, right? Which is end your presentation with a memorable quote, a story, which you can do. And this used to be exactly what I would end up doing in almost every training program of mine. I would end my presentation with a story, right? And that story, and I'll tell you the story like I'm ending a workshop with you, and that story would have such a powerful emotional impact on people, and it was a true story, right? So I would show this slide to people, and now I'll tell you the story, right? So this is my beautiful mother. My mother's name is Malin Kamat, and my mother used to like I told you right at the start of this workshop, I come from a business family, and I told you that both my mother and father, both of them used to work, right? And my mother used to handle one particular department from our family business. And my mother would always say this to me. She'd say this to me in Marathi, but I'll say this to you in Hindi. My mother would often end up saying to me, she'd say, Swapnil beta, मेरी अगर इंग्लिश अच्छी होती ना, तो मैं इस डिपार्टमेंट को यहाँ से कहाँ ले चलती, right? In English, that means, Swapnil beta, if my command over the English language was good, I would have taken this department from here to great heights. So then I would end up asking my mother, I would end up saying, so mom, why don't you better your command over the English language? And my mom would say, she'd say, improving your English language, बेटा वो इतनी आसान बात नहीं है, उसके लिए बहुत टाइम लगता है, उसके लिए बहुत मेहनत लगती है, महीने लग सकते हैं, 2-3 साल भी लग सकते हैं, right, to improve my English language. So basically translating that into English, you'd end up saying that improving your English language is not that easy, right? It could take months to improve your English language. Sometimes it can take a few years to improve it, right? So you think it's very easy, but it could take that much time. Today, it's been close to 25 years since my mother first said those words to me. Uh, Today, my mother handles that same department in that same family business of ours, sits on the same floor that she would sit on 25 years back, and she hates giving up stuff, so she sits on the same chair that she would sit on 25 years back. Now, over these 25 years, that department has grown a little. There are a few more people that report into a few more revenues that department seen. So it's, of course, it's grown a little over these 25 years. However, every time that I go to Goa for a holiday, on every trip of mine, when we're having a meal together, at least once on my trip, my mother will end up repeating the exact same words that she said 25 years back to me. She did saying, she says, Swapnil beta, मेरी अगर इंग्लिश अच्छी होती ना तो मैं इस डिपार्टमेंट को यहाँ से कहाँ सिखा ले चलती. So 25 years back, when my mother said those words, she thought she was very old, to change, to improve, to get better. Today, when my mother says those words, she's still too old. She still thinks she's too old to change, to improve, to get better. And that's why I love this quote, right? I love this quote that says, "A year from now, you may wish you had started today." Right? So I'm sure you have ended up learning a lot of things during this 1 or 2 day workshop, right? Have you learned a lot of things? I'm sure you have. You made a lot of notes, and I'm sure right now you feel very inspired to put a lot of these things into action. But there are a few things that I have noticed over all these years of doing trainings, right? Although there are 30 people sitting in this classroom and all of y'all have made notes and all of y'all have learned stuff, the thing that I've learned is that typically after a workshop, 15 people walk out of the workshop exactly like they came in the morning, right? They made a lot of notes, they clapped a lot, they learned a lot, but they go out and they don't really take the learnings of this workshop seriously and don't apply anything to their life. There are another 15 people that walk out of this particular workshop, and those 15 people actually start putting into action some of the things that they learned during the workshop on communication skills, right? So they start improving their body language, they start listening better, they start being more precise, they start doing those things. And then a strange phenomena happens, right? After 7 days of attending the workshop, out of those 15 people, 8 or 9 drop out, right? They forget the learnings of that workshop because they don't really implement it with the rigor that they need to, right? So 7 to 8 people drop out right there, another 7 remain. In a couple of weeks time, out of those 7, another 5 of them, stop using all the things that they learned in the workshop, right? They don't put it into action. And there are 2 odd people that remain, and they keep implementing the stuff that they've learned to the workshop because they take themselves very seriously, and in the end they become masters of communication, and in turn go to the senior levels of management, which are so difficult to go to because they actually take the learnings and bring them into action by putting them, right? And those are the people that typically become your bosses and super bosses, not because they were smarter than you, but just because they had more discipline than you to put those things into action. Okay, so to start with, decide which 15 people you want to be a part of. Do you want to be a part of the 15 people that came and went and did nothing about this workshop? Or do you want to be a part of the 15 people that came and from the next day started putting that into action? Right? Which 15 do you want to be a part of? Now, that call of which 15 you want to be a part of, only you can take, right? No HR of yours can take that call for you. No boss of yours can take that call for you. No person in the learning and development team can take that call for you, right? You need to take that call, or you need to take that decision for yourself. And that's why make the right decision. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. So this is the takeaway slide now for you. So again, coming back to it, I would end the workshop with a story. I would end the workshop with a quote, right? I would mix these two things up, and that's what I would end the workshop with. Why would I end the workshop like this? Because this is a true story, and that is really my mother. Um, but the story, more often than not, would inspire people to put into action all the things that they learned. right? And that's exactly what I wanted. That was my end objective. My end objective is not that people come and attend the workshop. My end objective is always, what do you take from the workshop? What do you implement to improve your lives? Right? And that's the action. That's my objective. And my story and my quote connected to that end objective that I had. So like I said, from the start to the end, everything needs to be connected to that end objective. And this story again was a part of that objective that was there, right? And it would have a great impact on people. And that's again another way in which you can end a session or end a workshop, and it works absolutely brilliantly, right, for people. So this is a session on some of the advanced things that you need to do as you learn the other stuff on business presentation and get a certain command or hold over it. Then this is the area that you need to move to. Okay, Arunima, do you have any questions?
No, Swapnil.
Okay,
None this time.
none this time. Very good. So at the end of this workshop, quickly make a note of your 3 to 5 big takeaways that you have. Please take these takeaways to your class with your life in your life coaching session. That's something that will help you. And of course, as usual, you're supposed to summarize the content of what you will. And if you have any questions, your coach is going to sort that out for you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Bye bye. See you.